This is Africa Digest. Good evening and welcome to Africa Digest. You're listening to Channel Africa, the voice of the African Renaissance, broadcasting from Johannesburg in South Africa. We're on the frequency 15235 kilohertz on the 19-meter band to West Africa. And I am Lulu Gabu, driving the show with Amanda Machaka, Wisani Matebula, and Sigile Lingwati. Top stories in Africa Digest at this hour. South African president reshuffles his cabinet again. The world marks the 10th anniversary of the Day Against Child Labor, and a new report rebukes the finance sector for ignoring nuclear risks. In economics, Mozambique's central bank cut its key lending rate to 12.5%. And in sports, London Marathon champion included in the Kenyan Olympic team. But first, the news with Amanda Machaka.
Thank you, Lulu. Good evening. Violence in Syria has once again escalated to levels seen before the ceasefire plan was put in place in April. That's according to the UN and Arab League Special Envoy Kofi Annan. In his view, the Syrian government has the upper hand to stop the violence, killings, and human rights abuses. Annan says the UN military observers in Syria have documented evidence of the use of helicopter gunships by government forces. Ahmad Fawzi is the spokesperson for the Joint Special Envoy.
The objective of creating this group is to convince the parties to implement the plan in its entirety. It is not to kill. This is the only plan on the table at the moment. What is lacking is implementation, and that is why we count on these member states with influence on the parties to put irrevocable pressure on the parties to implement the plan and stop the killings and begin a political transition. Violence in all its forms by all parties must stop immediately for the sake of the Syrian people. We're not taking sides in this country. The only side we're on is the side of the Syrian people, women, men, and children who are suffering.
Two people have been killed in clashes between rival militias southwest of the Libyan capital, Tripoli, in fresh evidence of the divisions in Libya's society, 10 months after an uprising ended Muammar Gaddafi's rule. Libya's ruling National Transitional Council and its Western backers are hoping that tribal violence does not jeopardize a July 7 election to choose a national assembly. Security officials say the clashes were between fighters from the town of Ghouta, who played a big role in ousting Gaddafi, and members of the al-Mashashad side, which chose not to join the rebellion. The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, says it urgently needs funds for children and women suffering from extreme hardship in the Sahel region of Africa. These are people under threat from diseases and victims of the crisis displacing people from Mali. An estimated 250,000 children under 5 years suffering from acute malnutrition received life-saving treatment in the Sahel during the first 4 months of the year as part of its emergency response in the region. Martin Perez, the regional chief of communication at UNICEF West and Central Africa, says they are appealing to government for assistance.
This crisis in the Sahel was spotted early. We managed to get funds early from a lot of donors and a lot of private individuals. And basically, that means that something like 5,200 treatment centers have been set up across 9 countries. So lives are being saved.
Ria Pieta has become the first woman to be appointed South Africa's National Police Commissioner. President Jacob Zuma finally announced that Bheki Cele has been fired. Zuma also announced a cabinet reshuffle that saw 3 ministers move from their portfolios. Pieta takes over a position that has been delivered in controversy in the past few years. There has been no stability since Bheki Cele was there.
The ANC Women's League says Pieta brings to the men in blue a track record of outstanding leadership for the government and the private sector. Pieta has extensive experience as an administrator, but no known experience with the police. He's a former corporate affairs executive for ABSA and Transnet. His stint in government also includes serving in the President's Committee on State-Owned Enterprises, as well as a commissioner for the Road Accident Fund. Her appointment comes as a surprise for many, as her name never cropped up in the speculation around who will replace Bheki Cele. Mshadi Galong, SABC News, Johannesburg.
And finally, Sudanese authorities have suspended an independent newspaper and confiscated the entire Tuesday edition of another in the latest crackdown on the press. Sudan's first guarantees press freedom boss journalists complain they face heavy pressure from authorities, especially after the secession of South Sudan last year. Journalists say authorities have become more sensitive to controversial subjects such as the country's mounting economic crisis, corruption, or repeated border clashes with South Sudan. Security agents last week confiscated an edition of Sudan's most widely read newspaper after it blasted plans by the ruling party to end fuel subsidies. That's a wrap after this bulletin.
Thank you, Amanda. On to our top story. South African President Jacob Zuma has dismissed Police Commissioner Bheki Cele and replaced him with the country's first woman police head, Mangwashi Riapieha. Cele's dismissal follows gradations from the Board of Inquiry led by Judge Jake Moloi, which found Cele to be unfit to hold office. Just after he was found to have acted improperly in the procurement of police office space worth about $700 million. Zuma has also reshuffled his cabinet following the death of Public Service and Administration Minister Roy Padayachi and the resignation of Deputy Minister of Economic Development Enoch Godongwane. Leander Maume reports.
President Zuma has appointed a new police committee and reshuffled his cabinet. He fired Bheki Cele and appointed former group executive of ABSA Riapieha as the new police head. Earlier, some opposition parties raised concern about the appointment of someone who has never been a police officer. But President says Pieha has experience to manage the police service.
Ms. Pieha brings a wealth of experience as a senior executive who understands the responsibility of government in the fight against crime and the duties imposed in dealing with state assets. I have every confidence that she will show leadership well as National Commission.
He also thanked Cele for his commitment to crime fighting, saying during his tenure, Cele managed to bring down the country's crime levels.
General Cele was appointed as National Commissioner in August 2009. He was given a clear brief to take war to the criminals and to make South African safe. The crime statistics indicate that the approach has worked. The crime levels have dropped over the years. Between 2009 and 2011, overall serious crime decreased by 5%. In the same period, murder came down by 6.5% and attempted murder fell by 12%. Car hijackings declined by 24%, while house robbery dropped by 11%.
The president also used the occasion to make some changes in his cabinet following the death of Public Service and Administration Minister Roy Padayachi.
I'm pleased to announce a few changes in portfolios and the appointment of new ministers and deputy ministers in some portfolios. The ministerial appointments are as follows. Public Service and Administration, Ms. Lindiwe Sisulu. Defense, Ms. Nosiviwe Mapisa Mukula. Transport, Mr. Ben Martin. Correctional Services, Mr. Sibusiso Ndebele. The deputy ministers are as follows. Transport, Ms. Sindisiwe Chipunga. Public Enterprises, Mr. Gratitude Mavanyishe. Public Works, Jeremy Tony. Economic Development, Ms. Dengwe Mchize. Higher Education, Mr. Mshituzi Mana.
The swearing-in ceremony of these members will be held in Parliament tomorrow.
That report by Leander Maume. Opposition parties in the South African Parliament have welcomed President Jacob Zuma's decision to fire suspended police commissioner Bheki Cele, but they are unhappy with the president's